Ahla wa sahla. Right now I want to talk about a single word in Arabic, ma. If you're watching this, you probably know and love ma as a word. You've probably seen it as a question word we use for nonverbal sentences. Possibly the first sentence that you were asked to utter, or the first question that you learned how to ask in formal Arabic was ma ismuk, what is your name? Or you also probably remember that ma can be used to negate verbs, both in formal and colloquial Arabic with slightly different rules. But ma also has a lot of other functions in formal Arabic. And those are what I want to focus on right now, because as advanced learners, there comes a time where we have to start differentiating between them. I know that I, as a learner of Arabic, have had the experience of reading a text and encountering ma in a place where I didn't expect to encounter it, and figuring out, okay, it wasn't a question word, and it wasn't negating a verb, and it was doing something, but I was going to cross my fingers and move on and hope that it wouldn't impact my comprehension too badly. And that's a skill that's worth acquiring, knowing when to move on, skip over something that's opaque to you. But as advanced learners, we need to start to differentiate between them. So in formal Arabic, one of the other main functions of ma is as a link between a preposition and whatever idea is following it in the sentence. You know a couple of these words already, it's likely. One example is عندما, which means when in the narrative, not the interrogative sense. When I was young, when I used to live in the old city, something like that. And it's a combination of عند and ma that enables us to follow this idea of عند at a certain point with a verb. So if I wish to say something like, when I arrive at the house, I can say عندما أصل إلى البيت. And the ma, whether or not we knew it, is helping us, is giving us the ability to use a present tense verb, in this case conjugated for أنا, أصل, I arrive. If we wished, we could also compose the same sentence using a masdar, but then we would have to get rid of the ma, or to think of it differently, if we want to drop them out, then we have to use a masdar instead. So I could say instead عند وصولي إلى البيت, which we might gloss as upon my arrival at the house. It sounds a bit more formal, but the ma is what enables us to use a verb. We have a couple of synonyms actually for عندما that both mean that narrative when. In colloquial Levantine or Egyptian Arabic, you might have heard lamma. Again, we have a ma. Or in very formal Arabic, you might also encounter حينما. حين is a word meaning a time or a moment. So at the time that, and we could swap in either of these synonyms for عندما here, but they all function the same way. One other important use of ma that we see is if we want to put an adverb at the beginning of a verbal sentence, we use ma as, again, just a connector between these two ideas. Ma sneaks in a lot under that umbrella with that responsibility. So if we wanted to say, I often go to the cafe, and if I wanted to put that often idea at the beginning of the sentence, if I wanted to front that idea, I could say كثيرا ما أذهب إلى المقهى. Or if I wanted to say I rarely go to the restaurant, I could say say, نادرا ما أذهب إلى المطعم. So, in order for this to work, we need ma before that verb that we're using to begin the rest of our sentence. This can be a bit tricky because sometimes, especially if you're used to using colloquial structures, you might see the ma and the conjugated verb and think, maybe that ma is doing negation work, because we encounter that all the time in spoken Arabic. But that's not what it's doing here. It's just serving as kind of a bridge between the idea of a whole lot or rarely, or we could say qalilan ma, not that often. There are other adverbs we could use, but it's serving as a bridge between these two ideas. One way of bearing that in mind is remembering that while we can use ma to negate all kinds of verbs in some colloquial Arabics, we only really use it for past tense verbs in formal written Arabic. So if we see a structure like this, with an adverb at the beginning and a present tense verb and a ma sandwiched in between them, then probably the ma is just serving as a helping particle for that adverb. We also get a couple of structures with ma that can give a conditional meaning to whatever we're saying, and we can construct a question word with a ma at the end of it to give a more conditional idea. I should mention that in some examples, like with عندما, حينما, لما, the ma attaches right to the end of the word, whereas with these adverbs here, the ma is typically going to be separate. It's going to be a separate word. But if we're making a conditional construction, if we want to say something like wherever or however or something along those lines, we can take a question word like aina, where, and attach a ma right to the end of it and get a word meaning wherever. Or if we wanted to say however you want to do it, you could take kaifa and then just attach a ma to the end of it. We also have a couple of conditional wherever, however type constructions that don't come very directly out of question words. For example, if we wanted to say whatever, we wouldn't say mama, that would be a little bit strange, but we can say mahma. Or if we want to say whenever in the sense of each and every time that something happens, we actually use kull and attach a ma to it. Not in the sense of whenever you want, but in the sense of every time I go and do something. Whenever I go to the restaurant, I see him there, something like that. With these conditional constructions, we tend to use a past tense verb after, even if the meaning is present tense. Just like the conditional إذا, if, that you probably know. If we wanted to say, if you want to go, I would have to conjugate the wanting in the past tense. إذا أردت, إذا أردت, not إذا تريد or إذا تريدين. Same thing with these conditional constructions. In fact, إذا sometimes in very formal speech also gets a ma after it, that again is not a ma of negation, it's just a ma that serves as a bridge between this conditional idea and whatever follows it. So, there are just a couple of functions of ma that we encounter in formal Arabic. There are a few more, but if you get a basic grasp of what's going on just in these couple of specific situations, it will be very useful to you as you encounter and engage with increasingly more sophisticated texts.